Hey there, Sterile Processing Universe. My name is Hank Balch. You are watching episode 4 of Driving Dirty, a brand new beta test series that we're doing here on the Beyond Clean platform. Kind of a drive time show. I know it's late for a drive time on the East Coast, unless you got that swing shift. So maybe you are coming in, kind of mid-afternoon, midday over on the East Coast. But we're catching some of y'all early birds on the West Coast and everywhere in between. It might be time for your first break. You're sliding off into the break room, maybe run down the cafeteria, get you a breakfast burrito, whatever it is. Hopefully, we're going to bring you some interesting, insightful perspectives today on a number of different topics with some fantastic guests. So, without further ado, let me bring our guest with us into studio, do some introductions, and we get this party started. We're going to try to run till about 9:30 Central. So what was that, 10:30 Eastern, if I got all my math correct. So we're going to run about an hour. We'll have, depending on how the conversation goes, if anybody's watching us live and you got comments or questions, or if you just want to pick on our guest, I love that. So please put comments in the comment section. And I love to hear mean things that you say about the guest. Not me. Say nice things about me, but anything that you disagree with the guest, go ahead and put those in. And we will be putting comments on the screen. So the meaner, the more likely they're going to be on the screen. I'm just kidding, but I really like these guys. Okay, so let's bring the guys in with us here today. Kris Jones is joining us from the great state of Oklahoma. I've got a lot of Oklahoma jokes, Kris. I'm not going to use any of them with you today on the stream.
I appreciate that. It's been a tough season.
Yeah, welcome to the show today. And
Thanks
Michael
for having
Matthews, you're a name and face that folks way back at the beginning of Beyond Clean, they know and they remember from the Beyond the Headline days, or Behind the Headline days, maybe is what we call that, as well as just the early episodes of Beyond Clean podcast. Mike was one of those early hosts. You've gone on and done a lot of creative, fun, different things, and you just started a new creative, role out there. So what is it that you're doing nowadays, Mike?
So I am now a clinical education specialist for HealthMark. Actually, just got back from orientation yesterday, last night, and lot to learn. Boy, there's a lot to learn, but that's a great feeling. I feel like we're all educators at heart, and educators at heart are learners, man. So I'm seeing some fun stuff on the horizon.
That's cool. I want to ask you some questions about headquarters. I've never been to HealthMark headquarters.
Okay, yeah.
There, so we'll come back to that here in a second. Kris, what is it that you do? So we know you're from Oklahoma, and this is not your first time on a Beyond Clean piece of content. You joined us here recently for the TLC conference, that Talking Loaners and Consignment, and you're in a panel discussion with us. But just in case folks missed your first appearance, now you're here for round 2. So what is it that you do?
I'm an orthopedic sales distributor in the central part of Oklahoma City. And I kind of specialize, if you want to use that word very loosely, in large joint recon. So hips and knees and shoulders.
And you're fairly active on the LinkedIn space out there. I guess we've been connected, I don't know, maybe it's been a year or so now. And but you've been just coming up on my radar more and more because I think we've got a lot of mutuals out there that we're also connected with. But there's a little cadre of the med device world and this kind of loaner rep world out there that's just starting to get more and more active, more and more content coming out. Folks are launching podcasts left and right. They're doing the content crib down there with Matthew Ray Scott, and they're I think I saw you at AAHKS recently. Did you head down there?
Yeah, I got asked to come down to AAHKS by a couple companies and meet them in person. And then I've actually been on LinkedIn since somebody asked me last night that we were having a discussion. I've been on, my first post was basically spring break of this year. So March 24.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll give a shout out to Stu Brandon. He's the reason I got on there, was because we had a discussion in like January about some stuff that was going on. And he was like, you should get on LinkedIn. And I was kind of like, I don't really need another social media platform. And he was like, I really think you should get on LinkedIn. I think you would enjoy it. And I think, it would be a good thing for you to do. And so that's why Stu's the person you guys have to blame for me being on LinkedIn if you don't like my content or disagree with it or any of that. So
if anyone doesn't know Stu, Stu's it's a great guy. There's a lot of great folks. There's a lot of great folks that work in our corner of healthcare, but Stu's one of just really genuine. And yeah, I love hearing that story that he's bringing more voices into this LinkedIn conversation. I thought I saw something, Kris, this week, and it might have been, I can't catch your humor sometimes because you're a pretty funny guy, just like Mike. And so I don't know if you're being like satirical or if you're actually being true on this, but I thought I saw a reference to your dog having an Instagram page. Is that like reality? Was I dreaming about that?
No, that's true. I don't know how much I want to say publicly before people think terrible things about me.
Well, you put it on blast on LinkedIn. That's pretty public.
So, my dog was Insta famous. He got up to, like, at his peak, he was at about 30,000 followers.
Wow.
That started. This is going to let people know how terrible I am. It started out as a joke. I got the dog. I wanted the dog for like years. We lost some dogs. And I grew up with, he's a miniature bull terrier. So a Spuds McKenzie dog to date myself. And for the younger people, he's a target dog. But I got one in 2019. And so you kind of know how that went. 2019 fell into 2020. And, I decided for a joke, I'd start this LinkedIn page for him, and I wrote from his perspective. So his perspective with me basically, being the mind behind it. So it was pretty sarcastic, and I don't know why it took off and it got bigger and bigger. And so during COVID, I had something, a creative outlet, as my wife said, when I wasn't in surgery. But yeah, that's what happened. Was it got to the point where I had people, he had sponsors, and he got recognized out in public. If we'd be at like PetSmart or anything like that, people would stop and want to take selfies with him. And it was, it was weird. It was weird. Social media is interesting. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. That's how Mike used to feel. When we were walking out in public, people would stop and take selfies with me, and he'd be like, "What the heck?"
Let me tell you, going the trade show floor with Hank is a terrible experience. It sucks.
Not for an introvert, especially.
Yeah, because literally, like when I go to a trade show, I just want to like walk around, and I don't particularly want to talk to anybody unless I'm really interested in what you got. But like literally, you walk 5 steps. Oh, it's Hank. Let's have a 20-minute conversation and take selfies. Oh, it's Hank. Let's take. And it's like, dude, like I should be done with this trade show floor at this point. And it's like we've gone 30 feet.
That's why I keep Mike with me, though. He's really good about letting the hot air out of my head. I said that one time to someone. It's like, don't tell him anything else. We're not going to be able to fit his head back through this door.
Yeah.
On the way out. All right. So is the Instagram page, before I move on from the Instagram page, is that still active? Is your dog still posting?
Yeah, I feel bad because it's still active, and I may post on there like once a month, and I say it's bad and kind of sad because I'll get multiple like DMs about, did he pass away? What's happened? And I mean, it's just one of those things where your focus changes. I mean, and so you get these people that feel like they're a part of your life, and then you just kind of peace out on them. And so I kind of feel bad about that, but it's still active.
Have you had any followers of your dog transfer you over to LinkedIn when they found out that you joined LinkedIn? They're like, you know what? I want to know the man behind the dog.
No, I haven't seen that. There was one person I met was like, he's just the funniest writer ever. And we'd met out at and I was like, you do realize that I'm the one writing. It's not the dog. It was just one of those discussions where you're just like, I think, my kids got in the car and were like, she did realize that, you're the, the voice behind the dog. And I was like, I don't know. So, but yeah, there's still an account if people want to like track him down. It's at Mini Bull Stark. If somebody really wants to.
At Mini Bull Stark.
Yeah. At Mini Bull Stark. Yeah.
Okay.
He's named after Tony Stark, basically.
Great.
Mm,
All
nice.
right. All right, Mike. So let's go to you here. Like you referenced, you got the new clinical education specialist. Is that that's the title?
Yes, that is the title.
And I know there's a group of, oh man, they got a fantastic team over there at HealthMark, like just some of the best educators in the industry, I feel like, and really dedicated, really creative. We got a couple of them on the Beyond Clean Expert Series. We got Melinda Elamari right now as our packaging princess. That's kind of the unofficial name of a series, but she's our sterile packing expert for 2024. And we've done a lot of other work through the years with Sharon. Even way back, Ray Tarasi was one of my he was my adopted mentors. I adopted him. He did not decide to mentor me, but I said, Ray, I like it enough. Like, I'm gonna start claiming you as like my mini mentor here. And yeah, like just have so much love for everything that they're doing over there. But I've always been curious what headquarters looks like out there, because I've seen some pictures and like it seems pretty legit, and they've done a lot of investments there. So yeah, what was that experience for anybody like me that is just curious?
It's very large, like huge, and it's not just a single location. Like they're in an industrial park there in north of Detroit in a place called Fraser, and they actually have like several buildings in that industrial park. And there is one really big one that's like the primary warehouse, and where they, actually do some of the research and where they do some of the, creating of the stuff that they sell. But I tell you, the thing that really kind of just like stood out, it is without a doubt the cleanest warehouse and production area I've ever seen in my life. Like, I don't think I saw a single piece of like shred of dirt or paper on the floor anywhere. Like, it was crazy how clean this place is.
And that's saying something, because you kind of got an eye for what clean and sterile should look like.
I mean, yeah, like it just resonates, this idea of like, hey, this is a place full of people who are obsessed with cleanliness. Like, like if you're trying to broadcast that, like, you nailed it.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask Kris the same question to get these perspectives, because I think this will be an interesting side-by-side for you guys. So part of your role as clinical education specialist, I'm assuming, is not only kind of educating generically around like industry standards and guidelines, but, HealthMark has a huge product catalog. HealthMark, now getting a company, I'm assuming part of your kind of onboarding orientation is just introducing you to that scope of the product catalog and what it is that we sell and what the context of education around these various products entail. So what how do they do that? Like, I've never been like a restaurant server that had to memorize a menu or anything like that, right? So like my memory's pretty substandard, I would say. Is there a process? Do you just kind of like pick like a product line and then you go through like day by day? Kind of talk us through what that looks like.
Well, keep in mind, I'm still very new to this on this particular area. I'm moving from a service company into a product company.
Right.
So
and this is your first time, right? Because you did service before that as well. So this is
correct. And service is much more straightforward, because you provide this service. And there's nuances within that, right? But it's definitely not as diverse as products. And I'm going from no products into a company that has something like 7,000 plus products.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so it's like, all right, so clearly it's going to take time. And like I said, this is actually day 3 of my employment with HealthMark. But what we really started on, what were the key, flagship products? And so, of course, we're talking about things like TOSI tests. And getting to know, like, seeing them being made and why things are the way that they are. And then, of course, once we kind of have a good grasp of what they are, and of course, being in departments, we've used these things, so we're already somewhat familiar with them. But really getting into the nuances of what is it that makes it special. And I think that's probably going to be the case moving forward, is you start with your flagship products, and then you slowly move your way down the line, and you just start asking yourself, like, what is it that makes this particular thing special? Like, why does it exist, and what is different about it from the other products? Or are there other products? With HealthMark, there's a lot of things that they make that there really is no competitor for them, because they're the only ones who make this particular thing. And understanding that, what is it that differentiates them, and why does it exist, and just work your way through the list.
Okay, so that seems that's going to take a while. The work.
Yeah, it's gonna be a bit.
So Kris, I was talking to, I don't know if it was Zach yesterday on our live stream or if it was somebody else this week, but we were talking about that new rep experience, either new to the company or maybe new to the service line. And you've kind of got a timeline for when, and I guess how long you have to learn the tray setup and the instruments, and then you're kind of thrown into this room with a whole lot of subject matter experts in that OR. You got your surgeon, got your circulator, got your scrub tech, got your anesthesia. Like, everybody knows what you're doing.
Smart people.
Yeah, and then you got kind of this college grad who's standing there like deer in the headlights, and these are their trays that they should be the expert on, and all eyes are kind of looking that direction. So what is that kind of onboarding experience, or maybe even like what was your experience, and kind of compare, maybe in contrast to what Mike was describing?
So, the dealing with joints it's kind of a long sales cycle. It's, there's other things in medicine that are pretty easy to trial and use, but asking a surgeon, hey, try this total joint that you're going to get to deal with this patient possibly for, 20 to 30 years and deal with revisions and so forth. That's a big ask. I've written about it before. I mean, asking somebody to do something like that, asking anybody to try anything new that what they're used to, is a big deal. I kind of don't remember what it was like to start. I mean, I've touched on this a little bit, but I started when I was 16. My dad owned the orthopedic distributorship.
That's right.
The first time I was in surgery I was 16 years old, which I've got a almost 16-year-old and an 18-year-old now. And I'm just like, what in the world was my father thinking, honestly, some days. And I don't want to sound like an old fart either, but I guess it was a little bit different back then. We didn't have credentialing and all of that. But so it was scary. I mean, I'd been around the instruments before, and then coming from a tech background while I was in college as a scrub tech, I touch on this a little bit. Sometimes it was, see one, do one, teach one. But I'm really hands-on tactile learner. So like, when I'm teaching somebody new, if we've hired somebody new, it's like, you need to know these instrument trays inside and out. You need to know the instruments that we don't use that are just in there because somebody thought that we needed to have these instruments in this tray for some reason, down to the ones that, they've got more numbers on them than you care to really, remember, but you need to know why they're there. And so I think that's the best thing to do is you need to know trays inside and out. Like, if it's turned this way, the upper right corner has this instrument in it, if you can read it correctly. So that's one big thing. Becoming a subject, expert takes a lot of time. And then it takes even longer when you're in the operating room. I mean, I could tell story after story about people that have been in there that didn't know what they were doing and answering questions they shouldn't have been answering. And people do make mistakes, but it's just, I think it's getting reps in outside of the operating room so that when you do go into the operating room, you at least don't make a fool of yourself, I guess is the best way to put it.
Now, you kind of alluded to this, but I want to follow up with you on this question, and Mike, I'm going to give you the same one too. In the atmosphere that we're describing, even if maybe you're not a new rep, like maybe you've been around, maybe it's just a new product line you're carrying or whatever, is this a scenario that you can fake it till you make it or not?
I'm sure that there's exceptions to everything. And so I'm sure there's some people that might be able to fake it and get away with it for a little while if they're around somebody if they're around a nice surgeon, let's be honest.
Okay.
But I've seen
There's
guys.
nice surgeons out there, Chris. Where are these nice surgeons?
Both of them.
Are they geographically like they're just both in Oklahoma? That's where they ran off to.
No. So, I mean, but I've seen nice guys even have people in the room fake it. I mean, I'm not going to throw anybody by name.
Everybody knows it, but they're just being nice to them because.
And it depends on the day. Everybody has bad days. And I watched a guy say something to one of my main surgeons years ago, and I knew what he said was wrong. And I kind of like gave him one of those side eye things. And it was late in the evening. It was like the 7th case of the day that was an add-on for a problem. And the surgeon turned around, looked at him, and he goes, "Get out of my room." And that was it. I mean,
wow.
And so, I mean,
context. Yeah,
and he was.
I guess the answer is probably not.
He was not back after that. So,
So, Mike, a little different context, and I know you're 3 days in, so like you can speak kind of broadly clinical education at a high level because that was your previous role as well. And in the realm of clinical education, I know everybody, not everybody, I think it's changed a little bit, but it used to be far more common. We wanted to come to that expert level. We wanted people to call us experts. We want to be able to put expert in our resume or in our tagline. And I'm saying this, and if you go to my LinkedIn page right now, it probably says sterile processing expert somewhere on that. Just because there is a marketing component to that, people that don't know anything about this space, I do want them to know, hey, you can come, you can trust what I want to say. That's the vision for the expert. But we also know just because you call yourself an expert or you like that phrase doesn't necessarily mean you're hitting whatever standard that is. And there's not really a standard out there. But in the realm of clinical education, if you're giving bad advice, like Kris said, hey, like the bad advice for that one rep is like, get the hell out of my room. If you're giving bad advice as a clinical educator, there could be other implications. So let me just ask you straight here. In the clinical educator role, either a department educator or kind of a high-level vendor clinical educator, can you fake it till you make it in that role? And if not, how do you nuance when you don't know the answer to the problem, or when you're new in your role to add value, but you still don't know everything yet?
Yeah, I think to answer your first question, can you fake it until you make it? I think in this particular role you can. The problem is that a lot of people fake it and never make it. They become content with their faking it.
And they're actually not faking it. They just just never gonna make it.
They're in a constant state of faking it, and the real problem with that is that Hank, we've seen this before, that bad information spreads like a virus, and when it becomes entrenched, it's incredibly hard to displace. And so in the example that Kris had, you've got a true expert in the room who knows when somebody is full of it and has the authority to say get out. Unfortunately, in more of the sterile processing space, you typically don't have that a lot of times. And so sometimes people can just spit out, bad information that sounds good, and people will listen, and people will agree with them and say, well, all right, but this guy's supposed to know what he's talking about, and they get really bad information as a result. And once that bad information becomes entrenched, it spreads, and it's really hard to displace. And I think that's why one of the most key factors for clinical educators is the humility to understand that you don't know everything. Like, this is way too broad of a space to expect any one person to just know everything. Like, that just doesn't exist. And Hank, when you're starting Beyond Clean, and I was working as a host those first couple of seasons, I think prior to that, I would have said, yeah, I've got a pretty good grasp on most stuff. And then we start talking to actual experts, and you find that in order to become an actual expert, you have to focus on very small topics and know those topics extremely well. And when you're kind of an education generalist, you cannot dive into too many areas that deeply.
Right. Yeah, and that's something Kris and I were talking about podcasting off the air a little bit, and you see it in podcasting, you see it in education, you see it in career development. To your point, Mike, a common error is people try to be the podcast about everything, like the healthcare podcast, okay? Or they try to be the sterile processing expert who knows everything about everything, and they fail to niche down to that level that is reasonable to still not know everything there is to know, but potentially know more and have a stronger connection and network in that category of knowledge that then you can kind of be a facilitator of knowledge. And that's another thing that you kind of alluded to with the humility part that came up on yesterday's interview with Zach Dispro, that if you want to be an outsider coming in, like Zach's saying is like, he's an ortho outsider. He's not coming from the industry. He's an innovator coming to solve challenges in the industry. And so he's coming from a position saying, I don't know everything. In fact, I don't know a lot of things. And I want you guys to tell me where the challenges are, what the holes are. And man, as an educator coming in, especially if you're supporting a particular department, coming in with that perspective of, I can find the answers. That is part of my job, to find the right answers. And it's another shout out to HealthMark, since you're on here, Mike. I text a lot of those HealthMark guys and gals when I have a random question. I'm like, hey, somebody's asking about this process, and like, it may not even be product related, but I just got your cell phone number. So I'm like, hey, can you tell me about this? Because at exposure over time to the things you don't know, like I asked that question once and now I know the answer. And the next time someone asks, then I don't have to text someone else. And so my knowledge base is growing there. But yeah, not faking it on the front end and being like, I think the answer is this.
Yeah.
Just to guard my own, sense of expertise or pride. Yeah.
Yeah. And that really, that's the root of it, right? It's the pride of, you don't want to have to say, I don't know. Like, this is some sort of shameful thing to not know something. And like, you got to let go of that and understand that the truly wise educator knows when to say, I don't know. And it's even okay, I think, to say, like, I think I know the answer. I think this is the answer, but let me go talk to somebody who would know better. Right. And so you're right. You find yourself a lot of times as an educator, not necessarily being the guy who knows the answers, but being the guy who knows the answers, and it's like, if you can just make those connections, right, you're providing that value to the customer and to the audience, and you don't have to know everything.
Kris, transferring this onto the sales component, though, and this may not be a one-to-one transfer, so I want you to kind of nuance or push back if you want to, but in your role, do you represent a particular company, or are you representing multiple companies?
Multiple companies.
Okay. So either way, you got a particular line that you're representing to a surgeon, the expectation is, if he has a question about it, you should know the answer.
Correct.
So if you say what Mike and I are saying on the clinical education side of, I don't really know that, but I can go find the answer. Like, you may get away with that maybe once, but if you keep saying that on some of these surgeon questions, they're going to start potentially questioning, does this guy really know what it is he's trying to sell me and support me on? Is that true or false? Or like, you got a comment on that?
My comment to that would be is it depends on like what the question is. If you are having to constantly like get on your phone and look up the changes in the diameter and like an A to P or M to L plane for like the sizes, like what's a size 3 to 4? Well,
I'm shaking my head like I do, but I'm gonna be humble and be like,
so
you're speaking Greek to me.
So like, that's just a measurement change. So let's just say from a size 3 to 4, your medial to lateral, plane changes by 4 millimeters. If I'm having to go look that up every time that I'm in surgery with the guy, I would assume most surgeons would start to question, like, what's the deal? You need to study more at night. You should know these things. I've been in surgery before where, let's just say that things go off the rails, not primary surgery, but like big revision cases where I've had to say, the surgeons turned around and said, how long is this, and I'm like, I think it's, to what Mike said, I think it's 15 millimeters. It looks like 15 millimeters to me, but give me a second. I'm going to step out of the room and call the engineer that designed it to get an actual exact measurement. I mean, that's something that I don't know, but it's something that I know. I mean, I think it was Henry Ford. There's that story they tell about Henry Ford where, somebody said, well, why are you the owner of the company? You don't know this. And he like called in the engineer I've heard that story told multiple ways, but
he's got the button. He's like,
yeah,
I hit the button and somebody else comes.
Yeah, that story. And so what Michael said is like, I know who to call to get the answer. If it's something that's a specialty thing, like something weird, I think general, like the things that I need to know on a day-to-day basis, I know those inside and out. And I think that that's what those guys want inside the operating room, and to speak to what I think they want honesty. Like you guys both said, I mean, if I don't know the answer, faking it in the operating room is not, there's a patient on the table. That's not the time to be sitting there faking, and that's just, and so, I mean, maybe a younger guy's not going to, but I mean, I'm humble enough now to be able to say, I'm going to step out, make a phone call, and we're going to get the right answer on how long this is before we, proceed with the case. So, I mean, that's just part of it.
I think what you just said there is really, really key, right? Like you've got to keep things in perspective and understand like what is the most important thing that's going on in that moment. It's the patient. It's not your reputation. And I understand your reputation is really important to you and that's your brand. And so I'm not saying it's not important, but there has to be a prioritization of what is most important. And when the patient's on the table and you're making life-altering decisions potentially, like that has to take precedence even above your own self-image.
Right.
Correct.
We're about halfway through our stream here. So if we got any, I can see that we do. We've got live audience members tuning in here from different platforms. So I got a shout out earlier from Heather Hinkle. Heather, if you're still tuning in there from YouTube, appreciate you. And we're a huge fan of you too. Thank you for your support. If you're tuning in from anywhere else on a plane, train, or automobile, we'd love to know how you're commuting or right now. If you're driving, maybe don't comment. Wait until you get to where you're going and then comment. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If you got any comments so far, I know I referenced hate mail at the beginning of the show. Haven't seen too many hate comments, so I think we're doing a good job, guys. You're representing yourselves very well. But anything you want us to cover in the remaining half hour of the show, please comment in there, and we'd love to hear from you. I want to go to AAHKS next, Kris. I've never been. It seems like a big deal. I have no idea how big. Like you see pictures and you're just like, yeah, but like how many booths, how many people, what's the experience like? I'm coming from a sterile processing experience. So like we go to HSPA conference and then I've been to AORN, been to APIC, which is the infection control conference. I've been to OR manager and, AORN, I don't know if you've ever been to AORN, Kris, but that's probably the largest one that I've been to, even like larger than the sterilization congress, like the World Congress. But I got a feeling AAHKS may be bigger, or if it's not bigger, there's more money being spent. So it's probably cooler. But, tell me what your experience was. Was this your first time going this year?
No, I've been to AAHKS a few times before this.
Okay.
I haven't been since COVID, if we're going to like make big jumps in time. So yeah, I've been several times before. It was drastically bigger than before when I was going before COVID. I had a surgeon that liked to go down, so I'd usually go down with him for a day. It falls always around my daughter's birthday.
Okay.
And so family's a priority for me. So this time I drove down on Thursday night, was there Friday, drove back late Friday night. Which
it was close. It was in Dallas, right?
Yeah, which I mean
that's
traffic.
Close compared to to Vegas or whatever.
Yeah. So I've never been to AORN. I have to think AORN is just actually gigantic. I would assume that it's kind of like the Academy AAOS for orthopedics, which is
I haven't been to that either.
I mean, it's monstrous, and the amount of money that's spent at that has to be, I mean, mind-boggling. They've got double stacked booths. Some of the big companies do. And I mean, AAHKS, the guys that I talked to this time say that AAHKS is getting to the point where it's getting a little too big for what some guys like.
Okay.
It's a little less intimate.
Now, when you say that, are you referencing like what the reps like or what the surgeons like?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Surgeons, I mean, I have a surgeon that I was talking to about this. This was his first time to come down, and his comment was the problem with these like specialty meetings is they want them to be intimate, but for them to actually be big and to influence like they want them to, they have to be that the society has to get big and get yeah. And so it's like anything, there's that sweet spot, and it's really hard to like stay in that sweet spot, I think. But I enjoy it because it's smaller, and I was able to get my hands on a bunch of equipment to look at just to see if it would work for us in some capacity. So, and everybody's there, so I don't have to like make a special trip to see somebody and take time away from my family and from my business. So that's the one benefit I think that AAHKS has, and it's close.
And so as an independent rep, is that how you would define yourself? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's that broker model that Stu talks about.
Right.
Right.
I mean, some of that's just a little bit too complex for me. Like, I know it's a different model, so I just trust the process. But whatever you say. But yeah, so you go to AAHKS, then like you're kind of looking and seeing, hey, like, are there any other like types of equipment or process approach or whatever that you might want to be interested in bringing to your surgeons then?
Yeah, I'm looking at, implants, of course, and it's good to see what everybody else is doing. But this time I was specifically looking at some navigation systems and wanting to kind of get my hands on that and see what I think about it to present it to my guys up here.
Is there education sessions going on? Are there like poster presentations and talks?
Yeah, there's posters and talks, and there's tons of that going on. So,
now, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, Mike, I knew you're gonna. Something told me I was like, Mike's gonna jump in here from the interview side.
Well, I'm just curious. Now, I've never been to a conference where the surgeons were more of the target audience, but I have heard that the companies that are there can get pretty competitive with each other. Like it gets pretty, cutthroat was the word that I had heard used. And I say that coming from, if you go to some place like HSPA, the sterile processing conference, it's really not a big deal to go even to a competitor's booth and just kind of talk to people. People are pretty friendly, and they're not going to give you like insider information. It's marketing material, which is public anyway, which is fine. But they're not mean to each other. I've heard though at the events where the surgeons are, competitors get pretty aggressive. Is that accurate or not?
I've experienced a little bit of that. I'm not like a big 5 ortho guy. So I'm like in the mid players to the small players. They're kind of more than happy to talk to you. And like you said, I mean, anything they're giving you or showing you, it's on a website somewhere now with a tutorial. I mean, you can get a surgical technique. I've experienced that a couple of times. I mean, because I've been into some booths before where I was like, oh, this is cool. And they're like, hey, you can't be in here. You're another, because I've got a badge from one of the companies that I represent typically because the badges are so expensive. But I mean, this time I will say this, it was a little bit different for me going down this time because even with my mask picture that's caused so much like drama, so to speak, I was still getting recognized. And so people were stopping me to talk to me a little bit. And so, and I had the opportunity, since people on LinkedIn knew me, to go talk to some of the other booths just because I wanted to see their tech versus other times. But I would say that there's a little bit of cutthroatness for sure. I mean, people get pretty protective of their surgeons. I mean,
and it's understandable. I mean, like Hank, I'm trying to think. We talked about this on a Beyond Clean episode a long time ago, but there was a number that was given, and again, this has been several years ago, of what a single orthopedic surgeon's career is worth in revenue.
It was Cure 3 Cannabody, and it was how they value the lifetime relationship of a surgeon, with a company. It's in the millions of dollars. So it's not just like, oh, okay, yeah, you can go talk to Johnny and like you can see the new tech or whatever. Yeah, like you're protecting. Are my kids going to college at
Yeah.
like an in-state school or community college or
Your
like
technical school time, that's fine.
this is a big it's a big difference. Yeah, there's a lot more, right? Like you've invested potentially years in the relationship for this surgeon. You might have, depending on how you prioritize family, you may have missed family stuff. You're getting up early, you're going to bed late, like you're racking your brain, you're stressing out. Like you may have literally lost years off your life due to stress to support this surgeon. And yeah, you want to be cognizant of not, like these surgeons are not dummies either, right? They know what's going on. They can make their own decisions.
Oh,
They're
100%.
grown-ups. But I understand the impulse to be a little bit guarded, with that. But yeah, to your point, Mike, it's interesting, even at the sterile processing conferences that we go to, they're not as cutthroat, but because of where we sit as Beyond Clean, because we work with almost everybody in the industry, it's funny to hear competitors talk about, hey, can you go over to that booth and get me this brochure from that booth?
Yeah.
Or, what are they doing over at their booth? And I'm just like, okay, guys, this is
Well,
getting a little
I'll say this past year was the first year that I ever got kicked out of a booth.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And I'm still bitter about it. I'm not going to call the company out, but I like it was so weird because, and again, I've been to several of these, and I talk to competitors all the time, and I feel like coming as an educator, like I'm not a sales guy. I'm not looking to undercut anything, like I need to know what's out there. And but yeah, for the first time, I got kicked out of a booth, and like I'm still salty about it. Like that was months ago. I'm still mad.
The first, but not the last time, Mike.
No,
Probably
not
gonna
at all.
happen.
That's fine. Like I don't know. I guess I just
well,
got to figure out some way to take some anger out somewhere. I don't know.
I do want to ask, Kris, you alluded to this, but I want to make sure that we make the connection if it's the direction that I think it's going. And Mike, you're going to have some insight on this too, like we joked about at the beginning. But Kris, you said you joined LinkedIn kind of in the spring of this past year. This is your first AAHKS that you've attended after being present and connected on LinkedIn. What was the impact? I think I heard you say it was different this year because of LinkedIn, because people like they knew your name just by your name badge, like maybe not knew your face unless you had the mask on. But yeah, like, what impact did that have on just the value maybe that you had at AAHKS versus previous years?
So I'm an introvert by nature. My wife makes fun of me. People really think I'm an extrovert because I talk and I carry on and everything. But I like my privacy and so I don't like really, LinkedIn kind of was a blessing because it allowed me to like network, but kind of in my capacity,
Right.
I can write stuff, put out what I want, I can respond. And so, but I had a couple people ask me to come down so that I could like look at some instruments and kind of, I guess, give my, unprofessional opinion about stuff.
Did they ask you to come down because they got connected with you through LinkedIn?
Oh yeah. This is an international company.
Okay.
And so, I didn't have to come, but it was one of those deals where it was like, I felt compelled to go. That it was a good thing to go down this time. I met Stu for the first time. So there were a bunch of people that I've connected with and talked with, over LinkedIn and on the phone and whatever, but it was good to just, shake somebody's hand and be able to sit. Stu and I joked, we sat and had barbecue and talked for 2.5 hours about industry stuff, family stuff and all that. So that wouldn't have been possible without LinkedIn really. And so it was a different experience because, people already know you, so to speak, and you can relate on that level. And so, it was just different from that kind of perspective of, and an international surgeon that I could talk to on LinkedIn multiple times. He came by the booth of one of the companies I was at and recognized him. And so we talked for quite a while. And it's kind of weird to me, but at the same time, it's also pretty cool that you have this, network that, you can bounce ideas off of. And if you don't know the answer to something, it's like, oh, I know somebody that knows the answer to that. Or, hey, I know somebody that's going to know up in Michigan that this surgeon, does this procedure, you should tell mom, or grandma to go talk to them. So that was kind of a benefit of all that. So
it's a real network. Like I talk a lot, obviously, like big believer in the value of LinkedIn, but I think people miss that when you think of it as a social media network. You think like all these randos, like anonymous people out here that I'm never going to meet, and it's just like random comments or whatever else. But no, like this network is much, much smaller, even internationally. To your point, if you're plugged in and you're active in your niche and you're adding enough value on a regular basis, like that network becomes very, very small and very, very personal, and you make friends. Like I got friends all around the world now just through LinkedIn presence. Like when I go to the UK, like Dan Cool, we're having a beer because we've been connected for years and years and years. Like same thing with Pavel. It's just great experiences that add depth to our career, right? Like we've dedicated our lives to this, and to be able now to get relationships out of everything else that we're doing in our day job is just really, really cool. Mike, LinkedIn for you, maybe a different angle on the question. You recently went through a job transition, and I want to ask you a professional profile. You've been out there educating and speaking, right? Like you do the boots on the ground stuff too. So you're not just active on LinkedIn like I am. I don't do a ton of travel, but I am very, very active on there. But you've done both. You've been active on LinkedIn now for many years, and you've been out there doing educating, speaking at conferences and everything else. How important was it for you in looking for this next role? Maybe how valuable was it to you that you had name recognition in the industry? Did that help your cause? You feel like get the role that you wanted?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because really, I think what LinkedIn is in a way, it's like a living resume. It's a living resume of what you've got going on and who you are as a professional. And I think that's why it's very unique as a platform, and why I think even if if you're in the audience and you're just like a sterile processing technician, like you need to be doing stuff on LinkedIn. You need to be interacting with people. You need to be writing blogs, whatever, because the more you do those types of things, the more you've got that reputation that's going to help advance you and make those network connections that push you through the various stages of your career. Because to your point, Hank, I mean, I remember when you and we both published our first articles about the same time, and it was like a rocket ship for name recognition and career growth, career opportunities. Even just within the first couple of articles that had been published, I'm getting phone calls from people that I never would have met, asking me, what I think about a particular thing, or if I'd be interested in talking to them about something, all those sorts of things. And again, like when it's time to look for a job, or when it's time that you want to make a career change, those sorts of things, that's not the time to start putting your name out there.
Yeah,
you should have already had your name out there, years in advance. Right. And again, like I challenge people to think of LinkedIn as just an ongoing in-process resume for yourself.
Right. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of places to go with that. Yeah. Just give me one sec.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, like, I got to give a shout out though to the introvert comments.
That's where I was going. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because,
go ahead with that and I'll follow up.
Hank knows me, like, and I am famously introverted, Kris, and I got to tell you that I have had multiple conversations with people who were like, no, you're an extrovert. You just don't want to admit it. And it's like, you don't understand that when I'm at a trade show or, at a conference and I'm networking, like that's work, like that's on stage, that's like a stage presence. But like it is draining the battery in a hurry. And so like at a certain point, it's like, I just got to get in my room where it's quiet and just sit in a quiet room, like just to recharge.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting to hear you say that, and I honestly think there's a lot of us out there that people just assume are extroverts because we've just managed to figure out how to fake it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Kris.
No, I mean, I do think that I mean, it's kind of like that fake it till you make it comment from earlier. I
For
mean,
sure.
I'm not like, I mean, because that's what, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I've heard my dad say it, it's like, and I've heard other people say it, it's like turning on a switch. There's some people that turn it on and never turn it off. But I mean,
Yeah.
like when I'm out, I mean, there's days like if I've got a heavy surgery day, it's like when I come home, it's like I sit in the garage with the radio turned off, everything turned off for like 15 minutes to kind of decompress, because saws, all the noise, the talking, everybody wanting to talk, it's just kind of like I have to decompress, so to speak. And so I don't know why people tend to think that I'm an extrovert so much, but it's just like I mean, my true friends know. It's like, hey, it's 9 o'clock at night, we're at the Joneses house, it's time to leave.
Yeah. I'm done. Yeah, I'm done.
It's Chris's bedtime,
Yeah.
He's starting to turn off the lights and lock the door, It's
Yeah.
That was actually going to be one of my questions was, like, what's your decompression secret? Mine is if I'm at the trade show, I go to the hotel room, I will pull up my chair to the window and just sit in a quiet room, like no TV, no nothing. It's just I'm just sitting there staring out the window. Then that's kind of my quick one. And you said you sit in the garage, just sitting. Hopefully, your car's turned off in the garage.
Yeah,
that's a different issue.
So I'm really glad, Mike, you brought up that introvert piece, because I'm gonna join the party here. Like, I was looking at all of us. I've got a pair. So, like, these are blue light glasses, right? So, like, I don't have real glasses. You guys looks like you have real glasses, but I've got a pair of these blue light glasses that are black rimmed. So I could have been 3 black rimmed glasses, 3 hats, 3 hoodies. We didn't plan it, ladies and gentlemen, but
we would have been like contrarian. I've told you this before. I think Hank is just a contrarian. Just got to do it a little different.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be the same as y'all though, because I am straight up an introvert. In the exact same way, my battery gets drained, but I'm not a natural communicator with my speech. I got a speech impediment when I was a little kid, and I finally overcame it almost all the way in high school, but I still just every now and then stammer, get stuck, stutter, whatever. So for me, LinkedIn and social media was a tremendous gift, kind of like what you were saying, Kris. It was an opportunity to say everything I wanted to say, when I wanted to say it, how I wanted to say it. And that's where I started. Like back in 2012 or 2013, we didn't have a podcast. I was just writing. It was pure writing. I wasn't in front of people, not on camera, not recording my voice for sure. None of that. And eventually that gained enough confidence through the writing, through the feedback, like Mike said, like immediately, if your niche is not talking, in healthcare, like whatever industry you're in, if your niche is not talking specific, like let's say you're in like AstroTurf, and people are just not talking regularly about AstroTurf online, and you start talking, people almost immediately start paying attention if you're adding value, if you got creative insight. So that happened with me personally, and that over time created more and more confidence that, okay, people like and appreciate the kinds of things I want to say. And then the beautiful thing about podcasting and audio is there's a producer on the back end of it. So you don't got to be perfect in the interview if you got a good editor and producer on the back end to clean it all up. And then finally, after enough of that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go and I'm going to start my way through live streams like this and live conferences and everything else, and just roll with it. But it is night and day. Like, I'm a different person today in 2024 than I was in 2017 than I was in 2012 when it comes to being the confidence to communicate my insights and ideas. And it grew, through that LinkedIn feedback, because nothing really keeps you going like getting someone saying, yeah, I had that same thought that same challenge, or yeah, thank you for talking about that. Like I feel like no one else is saying that, and it just reignites that fire. So if anybody's listening in and you're not on LinkedIn, because this is streaming on YouTube, it's on X, it's on Facebook, or if you are on LinkedIn and you're just not that active, I hope you take away from this interview all kinds of different implications, right? Like for job growth opportunity, just for personal growth opportunity, for networking, for friends, like real legit friends. Like Kris mentioned, he was having barbecue with Stu. Like you don't do that for 2 hours with someone that you don't really like. That's a decision that you make. That's a true legit friendship that's growing over time. And that happens, guys, through LinkedIn, through social media, even through Instagram pages with your dog. So in the last couple of minutes here that we have, guys, this is a drive time show. We haven't had the opportunity really yet this week to talk about what else people do during their drive times. I want people to listen to this show, but there's a lot of commute time throughout the week and throughout the year. And this is a 1-week show. So you got a lot of hours to burn here and there, especially if you're a rep and you're driving across the state to different hospitals all the time. So Kris, maybe let's start to you. What's your favorite thing to do on your drives? What you go to, podcast or like books or music or radio?
So I listen to the radio quite a bit. I kind of am weird. I still listen to like current music sometimes because it keeps me in tune with my kids a little bit. So I'd listen to, I can't remember what it's called. It's like pop something on XM radio. Anyways, so I do that. I listen to quite a few podcasts. I'm going through The Office Ladies now.
Oh yeah, my wife listens to that show.
Yeah, so I'm working my way through that. I actually stumbled upon one recently called While You Were Pooping.
Okay.
I like it because it's like they're like 5-minute long podcasts, and so it's kind of like he gives you like he hits you with this like all these kind of he has like these little niche, like the one I got started on was meteorite hunting was why I thought it was interesting. It was literally like 5 minutes, you're done. So like if I'm like running from the office to the hospital, I can like knock a bunch of them out at once. So I feel like I'm getting a lot done kind of. Cool. Kind of like checking off lists. And so that's the one I'm kind of hung up on right now, but I like Freakonomics. I listen to podcasts if I'm not listening to the radio. Freakonomics is probably one of my favorite podcasts ever, honestly, to listen to. If nobody's listening to it, it's worth checking out.
And that's a good one. It's not just economics on Freakonomics. Like that's kind of the undergirding structure.
Yeah.
But yeah, they talk about the interesting things to your point. Mike, what do you say? We got about 3 minutes left here. Yeah. What's your go-to on your drive times? You do a lot of flying, I guess, these days too. So yeah, what do you do on the plane?
Yeah, usually it's audiobooks. And I like to get pretty diverse on audiobooks. I know, Hank, we've shared audiobook recommendations before. I'm currently working my way through Malcolm Gladwell's new book, The Revenge of the Tipping Point, which is quite good. And it's good because, like if you've got, a 6 to 8 hour audiobook, that's about one plane commute there and back, and so I was able to knock out most of that book just within the span of one trip, which is great. And then but I will listen to podcasts as well. Another one you can put on your list, though, is How I Built This. If you have any sort of an entrepreneurial bent, these are interviews with entrepreneurs who have made it, and it just kind of gets their story of how did they build their business, and what was it like, how many times did they fail in the process, and how often do they get lucky, and all that sort of stuff. And so How I Built This is a really good one too.
Yeah, I think I listened to the one from like Lululemon, the founder of Lululemon, and like Dippin' Dots might have been on there too. But crazy.
There's some really good ones in there.
Good. Well, guys, we are at the end of time. I want to thank you both for a terrific show. I knew this show was going to be a lot of fun with you two characters, so you did not let me down. Really looking forward to getting you back on a different dynamics. Kris, I know I got an episode that I need to do with you on weightlifting, powerlifting. And then, Mike, I'd love to get you more involved here in 2025 once you get settled into your new role there at Healthmark. But really excited for you. Actually, I want to talk to you about a conference that we've got coming up in the spring. So don't let me forget to reach out to you about that.
Sweet.
But
Is
for
it
everybody
introvert
tuning
conference?
in, go ahead, Mike.
Is it an introvert conference?
You don't have to do it live. Okay. So yes, it's built for introverts. But for everybody else tuning in, really appreciate you spending an hour of your very valuable time with us today. Thanks for all you do. No matter what role you play in this ecosystem of surgical services, it matters. You matter. And like we say each and every week here at Beyond Clean, we want you to keep fighting dirty. Peace.